Hello, my name is David Lewis. I'm head gardener at the Roof Gardens in Kensington, an acre and a half of themed gardens from the 1930s. And I'm here today to talk about decking and the way you'd use decking in a garden and some of the decisions you need to make when choosing decking. So the first thing, often when people choose decking, they choose it for the best reason ever, and that's because they like it. And then they put it in, and then it looks like it's arrived from space. Suddenly you've got this enormous great wooden structure in your garden, and it's very frequently a very bright colour. It's very frequently something like that, and it does have this look of, yeah, why did I choose that? Well, actually, there's no problem there. It's just a case of thinking about the theme in your garden and the colours in your garden to start with, or at that point that it's landed from space, and colouring it. The other problem with a deck is you can sometimes move into a property and a deck is there and you think, and it's been there a while, and it may look as if it's just become a moss farm or an algae farm, or it's turned a grey colour. Well, then you've got another problem. The problem then is to get it back to a state that you can treat it and colour it and make it an integral part of your whole garden design. So then you would use something like a Cuprinol deck cleaner, which will get into the wood and slow down algae growth and moss growth. Bearing in mind you would get this on, you would get algae or moss on stone anyway. So yeah, so two things: think cleaning and think the colour that you want it. So when is a deck the perfect solution? Well, I'm going to use a case study of the Roof Gardens, and it's a slightly odd example, but I'll get to it in a second to show you. But a more standard use is when you've got a very thin roof, a regular roof garden, where you would put a deck on it. It weighs very little, it covers a large area quite rapidly, and allows and keeps noise levels down far better than stone. So that would be an obvious use for it. And when you go up to our Babylon restaurant at the Roof Gardens, we have a very large deck there for exactly those reasons. But a Spanish-style 1930s hacienda is not an obvious place to put a deck, but we have put a deck into this garden. And the reasons are the same reasons that most people choose a deck. The site is awkward, difficult to dig into, and uneven. Now for us, it was a cobbled courtyard laid out in the 1930s, which is impossible to walk on. But it's also a listed structure, so we couldn't dig down into the 18 inches of soil anyway to put any kind of structure over the top of it. So we put a deck in, a floating deck that sits protecting the listed structure, but gives us 10 metres by 5 metres of usable space, so that at our nightclub people can sit around and enjoy the space rather than tripping over in their high heels. I haven't got my own personal experience of tripping over in high heels, but I'm told it's a problem. So what we did is we put a courtyard, we created a new courtyard in this space here. And it's a floating deck, it's on a rubber mat, and it sits there. But of course we were going to have this same problem of it looking like it had landed from space. And we didn't want that. So it was a thing we needed really carefully to think about the colour that we were going to use. It's a sunny position in a very specific style of garden, and each of us have our own garden, and I think we all believe our own garden is a very specific, stylish type of space, and quite rightly, because it's ours, and it's a representation of what we like. So we had to choose carefully on the colour. So we went with golden maple, this colour here. It really does look like the sun is shining on it, even on a duller day. And as you can see, we've been quite brave with the colours we've chosen in the restoration of the gardens. So I think it was quite an appropriate choice. So that's my case study. Now, when thinking of your own garden, obviously not everyone has got a garden like that. And so when you're choosing where to put a deck in your own garden, well, I don't know what your garden's like, but I've got a couple of examples here where I think a deck looks great. And one of them, it goes against all logic of putting wood down on the floor. But in a woodland grove, so if you've got quite a shady garden, a deck is quite a good solution because there's a lot of roots under those trees. So if you're having to dig down to put in paving or whatever, then it can cause a problem, whereas a deck is on posts and then on a frame. So you're causing less damage to the trees you've already got, and you can get very beautiful lines with either a straight line on an edge or a nice curve to the edge of a garden, and then you've got the green of a woodland planting. Now in a woodland setting, obviously you've got to make sure it's clean. Clean it because you will get more build-up, as you would on any paving, of moss and algae, but I would go with a darker colour because the shadow you will get on that is going to be far better from the trees, and so you will get a greater contrast. The other position where a deck is perfect, and everyone thinks of it in the sort of American West Coast, a large deck in a in a sunny south-facing garden, which is everyone's dream garden actually. If you're a garden designer, you turn up and we say, oh, we've got sunny south-facing, it's wonderful because you can get pretty much everything that people want in. But it's the perfect position then. But there, I would think more about the brighter colours, because you want to enhance, in the UK, enhance that feeling of sunniness and warmth, exactly as we did at the roof gardens. The other thing to consider, which you've probably already considered when choosing what your garden is going to be like, is the style of your garden. And I would argue that you can put a deck into any style of garden. So, as I've just been saying, that sort of American West Coast feel, that's fantastic. If you're a little bit more courageous, you'd still need to treat the wood first, but if you wanted to paint your deck, obviously you'd have to do it more often, but you can then use a more intense colour, like one of the shades varieties of colours. But if you're painting, then obviously you do have to maintain it more often. But with the stains that I've used, again, this does look like summer, doesn't it? It has that feeling, and if you've got brightly coloured planting around it in either pots standing on the deck or in the gardens around it, then something like that is going to give you a great contrast. In a contemporary garden, and there's an example here at the show on one of the show gardens, you can get very good sharp lines into a garden, and so if you want a nice big sweeping curve running down your garden, a deck, you can do that very simply and relatively easily by the saw line, but you can also get good sharp straight lines and your different levels very easily by the way you constructed your frame. Again, because fashion is fashion, I would suggest the darker colour again for that contemporary look. The very vivid plant colours are very fashionable at the moment, and if you look at all the interiors magazines, wood flooring tends to be the darker colours now. So it's the same kind of feeling. Your garden is a representation of your taste and style, as is the interior of your house. Another very good reason to use a deck in a garden, and I always thought this is a great one, I have a 2-year-old daughter myself, is it's nice and soft compared to stone. If you've got a child playing on an area like this, then it's great. If you've got a 2-year-old playing on a small lawn, that small lawn isn't going to be lovely green stripy lawns. So a deck as a solution to that can be fantastic. And the other thing about a deck is that it reduces the sound levels in your garden. If you've got stone or brick, your garden is going to be noisier. So if you've got children running around, then again, a deck is a good solution. And any of these solutions, in an early stage of planning a garden, then it's a great way of think about it at that very early stage. But also, if you've inherited a garden, or you want to add an extra seating area, then I often think that a deck is a very good way to go. Okay, so I'd like to thank you all for your attention.